Buzzkillers. Kathy and Sandy are here with Tom Casey, the person running for school committee, against Lisa Martin. There's one open seat and two runners, and he's joined us today to give us a little background on himself and why he wants to run as selectman. So take it away, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you. So thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity. So a little bit about myself. I have basically been a lifelong Pepperell resident. I've lived here for almost 30 years now. So we had moved here when I was very young, and I've gone through kind of the school system. I always knew I wanted to go into education from a very young age, and so I kind of pursued that and was fortunate enough to get a teaching degree and kind of move into teaching pretty quick out of college. And I taught for 8 years at Nashua North High School as a social studies teacher, and kind of along the lines of, it's pretty cliche, but you hear a lot about kind of wanting to affect change and kind of take on more of a leadership role, and there's just ideas that you may have. And so we had a long-time department head who had stepped down, and I was interested in the position, so I applied for and got the department head for social studies position. And then I did that for about a month, and then I got a call pretty quickly from my building principal, and she had given me a call and just said, I have an assistant principal job opening up, and I would love to have you put in for it. So I put in and I applied for that and got the position, and I did that for 3 years. And then this past year, I was applied and received the position as the assistant principal at Bedford High School in Bedford, Mass. So that's a little bit in terms of, just kind of my educational background as a teacher and now an assistant principal. And I'm also the father of 3 great young boys. So I'm also a parent now in the district, and I have my oldest son is in kindergarten, and our second son is at preschool at the Squanicook, and we have another little one who will be joining pretty soon.
Nice.
So
Yeah, that's busy.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So what does the school committee do?
So there's really kind of 2 major roles of the school committee, and one is to create policy, and then the second would just be oversight of the superintendent. So those are essentially the 2 primary roles.
And how do you oversee the superintendent? What does that mean?
So a lot of it, I think, my experience working, with schools, I think a lot of it's collaboration. So, you're gaining information from the superintendent. I know a lot of times, concerned citizens will reach out about, a question or concern that they might have about things that are going on in the schools or different ideas that they might have. And so, you're kind of just, again, you're running for a position, so you're a representative of the people.
Do you always have to get your information from the superintendent, or do you try to get independent information from other sources to be more objective dealing with the superintendent?
I mean, I think any elected official, they want to receive information from any number of different sources. Okay. I think in terms of how a specific superintendent might want to conduct things, they are obviously going to want to keep the school committee posted on, any, emerging issues or great stuff going on in the schools as well. So again, I think open communication between the superintendent and school committee is pretty important.
Go ahead.
No, it's just about communication.
Yeah.
How do you plan on communicating with the town? Because one of the ongoing things is, people don't always attend committees, and then they go, oh, I didn't know that. So how do you communicate with the townspeople?
Keep them up to date.
Yeah, so kind of a blessing and a curse in this day and age, and obviously for our purposes here, social media can be a great vehicle for that.
You can always come back and have updates with us.
So there's certainly one idea. I know a lot of the school committee members now, if there are different issues going on, they'll post stuff online, or you have a lot of town groups that, while people may not attend school committee meetings or things like that, that's certainly an avenue to share information.
Good. All right.
So the budget's a big issue. and you work in Bedford. Now, that town obviously has more revenue to put towards a big school budget. So how do you compromise those two, town and school?
Town interest
Yeah,
and
school issues.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to look at both, not just schools.
for
You
sure.
have to consider the town's
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
And
a
I think
balancing act,
it definitely is.
yeah.
You know, I think, and even though I would say, you know, Bedford is, we're a very well resourced district, I think, you know, a lot of times, you know, maybe there's some inefficiency with where some of that money is spent, and how it's spent. So I think, you know, I have the experience of working in a very diverse, enormous district in
Mhm.
Nashua, and then kind of a smaller community, but a little bit more well resourced in Bedford. So I think looking at, you know, where that money is going and where, you know, I think that's important. You know, I think of, as far as budget, I mean,
Maybe it's a more ongoing throughout the year. Maybe the
Mm.
communication needs to be, I don't know, like from the get-go, instead of right around this time. Maybe
All
the
year long.
discussion just needs to be
Well, I think they have
ongoing.
meetings all year
Yeah.
long too, don't they?
But-
The school committee
Yeah.
and the
But
teachers
to
or
communicate it to
whoever.
the citizens.
yeah,
It's kind of the same time.
yeah, and I think, you know, I was
Social media,
fortunate enough to have the
yeah.
opportunity to sit in on kind of the joint budget meeting between the three towns.
Okay.
So, you know, that was obviously very informative. You know, but the school committee position that I'm running for, it's to represent Pepperell. So, also as a resident of Pepperell as well, I think that's important for me to
Mhm.
represent, you know, what is best for Pepperell. One of the things that, you know, obviously they're discussing coming up is, kind of the regional agreement and looking at, you know, the contributions of each town and how does that all play out. So, you know, if I were to be elected, that's certainly something that I would want to be a part of, and looking at, you know, Pepperell specific contribution, and then obviously the greater picture of the school committee itself and the entire district.
So when you say looking at the regional agreement, does that agreement change year to year? Is it flexible? Is it some areas that you can change? Is it, well, I'm just asking as a citizen, because honestly, I'm not really,
Yeah, so
and I'm sure a lot of people aren't, so.
Yeah,
maybe-
so my understanding is it's been pretty stagnant for quite some time, so, and I think that's why, you know, they're
Mhm.
looking at it now. And I think, you know, even if I'm not elected, I think that's something that, you know, that I would like to look at. You know, obviously, you know, for Pepperell, you know, we have the biggest population and we have the most students going there, so we also have the most funding going into the school system of the three towns as well, so. So I think that's certainly gonna be important for, not only the school district, but also I think the town itself, when you're looking at, some concern, you know, from obviously elected
Mhm.
officials and, you know, the town administrator who's kind of discussed that as
Mhm.
well. Just some concern about how much money is going into the school system.
Okay.
So, do you see schools changing, the way you educate? I'm not quite sure it's gonna stay the same, so as a teacher, how do you see it changing in the future? 'Cause
Yes.
I'm not sure we're gonna teach our kids the same way.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like virtual schools, I was reading something about them. Are those,
So,
is that true, there's virtual schools
there
can
certainly
go-
are.
go to?
Yeah, so there's, you know, they either virtual schools or online learning academies. There's definitely,
Do towns have to pay for that, for students?
so.
They're just online learning?
So it would depend on, it would depend on the type of school, so,
Okay.
you know, in Nashua, what we had, it was a program called VLAX, and, so it was all online, kids registered for free, we had, a reciprocal agreement with them, and so our students would just kind of funnel into that. I would say that was few and far in between, we really, we found that a lot of our kids had to be kind of really self-motivated and self-starters to do that.
Yeah.
And
Is
a
it a
lot of,
form of school choice? Is virtual learning a form of school choice?
so it would be like a homeschooling program.
Homeschooling,
So,
okay.
so you would do that through the superintendent's office to have an approved
Okay.
program.
Could you
But-
do a hybrid?
We've had kids do that, yeah, yep, so we had certainly, in my districts build a combination of the two.
Interesting.
But a lot of our kids we found were coming back, so they liked having the teacher in front of them. They liked having, you know, kind of the one-on-one interaction with their teachers,
And other kids.
if there's
Social.
the social piece is obviously huge, and I think, you know, where we would really see it is, you know, for those kids who are, you know, professional skiers or dancers, and just their schedules don't lend themselves to a traditional school day, and so that's when we would kind of see students the most through that. But in terms of, you know, education changing, I think, yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing that I've seen, you know, in my 12 years since I started is the social emotional piece. You know, just the supports that kids need. You know, mental health is a huge concern. It's something that we deal with. I came from a district where we had almost 50% free and reduced lunch, and that was a huge issue. And now I'm at a very well-performing and, you know, really accomplished district within the state, and we're still seeing it there. So I think it's across the spectrum in terms of, you know, social emotional health and mental health supports for
Does all
kids.
that fall under special education?
Not always.
Not all.
Not always. A lot of times you may have students who come in, and certainly that might warrant a referral to special education, or you might pursue a 504 plan for a student, but a lot of times it might be, you know, a referral to like an adjustment counselor, or you're coordinating with outside providers as well. So, you know, you might have a student and you connect with their guidance counselor, and they're sharing information with, you know, if there's a therapist outside of school, to just support that kid and support that family.
Do you see actually we might be moving back to a time where those kids may need to be more with kids themselves? I'm not quite sure if that's the right question I want, but
Special education. Is that what you mean?
special education, emotional needs kids, do you think that takes away from the other kids? Is
Combining all children
Combining
together
all of
because
them.
of Chapter 766, that said
Yeah.
everyone is entitled to an
well,
education.
maybe the question is the combining working?
Yeah. Or-
So yeah, so I think, I mean, for me, I'm a proponent of inclusion. And again, just my experience in education, you know, I think students benefit from working in, you know, with a diverse group of their peers.
Right.
You know, there are obviously certain instances where, you know, maybe when you're looking at education, you're always talking about the least restrictive environment. So in many cases, you know, I'm thinking about North Middlesex now, the school may not be, you know, the least restrictive setting for them, and their needs may not be able to be met based on the programming that's there. You know, I think as I've started to get more involved within the schools, you know, my son was on an IEP initially, he's since ventured into a 504 plan, but I think looking at that, you know, he benefited very much from an inclusive model. That being said, it may not always be appropriate, and I think a lot of times, you know, there may not be those services there for them. And you know, for me, I'm a pro kid guy. That's kind of how I marketed myself as an educator. So if, you know, the students' needs aren't being met, you know, let's talk about that, and let's look at how we can meet those needs. I think the district has done a great job about, you know, kind of building in a lot of programming and finding, you know, what might be appropriate, and
Yeah, that's
really trying to keep kids in district too, which I think when you're talking about budget is certainly going to be a cost-effective savings, and you know, and it also keeps kids local, you know, with their
travel
peers
time.
for sure.
good.
Interesting. Yeah.
Do you have any other questions?
Just a little bit of the school committee, how often do they meet?
So there's regular meetings. I think it also varies. I know there's a lot of subcommittees that meet.
Once a week, once a month?
So I believe it's either twice a month or once a month.
And what exactly do you have power over? What does the school committee control and have a say over?
So, and again, it really kind of falls back to those duties, which is, you know, you're working with the superintendent and it's policy. But again, I think you also serve kind of informally. I think you can also serve as a voice for the people.
Okay.
So again, you know, if you have concerned citizens, or parents.
How did parents stay in contact with the school committee? Did they have to go to meetings, or did they call you?
So you can
or
certainly
did
go to meetings. I know if you look like on the district's website,
Mhm.
they have, so every school committee member has an email. So you can contact through email,
Okay.
and I think that appears to be kind of the
Mhm.
preferred method. But they all receive, the school committee members all receive district emails, and
Mhm. Okay.
you can
And
communicate through that.
what is the biggest problem you see at North Middlesex District right now? What's the biggest problem the school district has?
So again, kind of sitting in on a lot of meetings, and
Mhm.
you know, just kind of doing my research before running for the position. I think the thing that I've heard, you know, from Superintendent Morgan the most is just the kids who are trying to get out. So you
Out
know,
of school, out of the district?
out of the district, yeah. So
For school choice or
yeah, so I think
charter schools or whatever?
charter schools, or you know, you're looking at going to St. Bernard's, or you're looking at going to Neshoba Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's not necessarily just because, you know, they're looking to pursue a trade that Neshoba Tech
Mhm,
might
yeah.
offer. It's just because they don't want to go to North Middlesex.
And because why?
I think there's just a preference to go
Okay,
elsewhere. What
okay.
I can say to that, I mean, I came up through the school system, and I didn't graduate from North Middlesex.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of some other circumstances, I had the opportunity to go to a different high school, and I did, and I graduated. So
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of the embodiment of that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, again, I'd like to be somebody who, you know, I've still lived in Pepperell my whole life, essentially.
Mhm.
So I'd like to come back and kind of look at, you know, why is it that kids are,
Yeah.
are looking to leave, and
Yeah.
Do they take like an exit questionnaire? Cause my thing would be, ask the family why they're outsourcing, you know,
Why they leave it,
out-districting
yeah.
their kids, like what would be the major,
Reason.
why? What's North Middlesex missing that would keep your child in the system?
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that would be great to get feedback in terms
Yeah,
of,
cause
you know,
it just seems like, okay, bye,
But
but
do a
we don't
survey
really know
to-
why, maybe it's something we could fix.
yeah,
Do a survey of the families that are
yeah.
sending their kids to
And they
the
may
district.
do that, you know,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not,
no,
I'm
right,
not
yeah.
entirely sure, but I
Yeah.
think certainly that feedback would be
Yeah.
super helpful if it's not being elicited right
Right.
now.
Right. Because you don't always lose funding just because you don't have kids in the district. Like funding, you only have 70% occupancy, but sometimes the funding doesn't reflect that from the
Right.
state.
Right,
So it's kind of a loss for the town.
for sure.
Yeah. So that seems important to try to figure out why they're leaving and try to keep them.
Well, yeah, you wanna make your school the best, you don't want,
It's a
you
brand
wanna
new
have
school.
kids
Yeah.
coming into the district, not leaving.
Plus,
Right.
it's a brand new school.
It is,
Completely.
it should,
Right, it's
people
a
should want
gorgeous
to come
facility,
there.
I mean,
Yeah.
just to have the opportunity
Yeah.
to take advantage of it, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, maybe they do ask,
Maybe,
Be
yeah, I don't know.
maybe we'll have to buzzkill the superintendent, maybe he has the answer. Yeah, I don't know,
Or
but
you
that
can
is
just come
interesting.
back once you're
Yeah.
on, if you're elected.
I'd be
Come
happy
back
to do
and
that, yeah,
update us.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Do you have anything else to tie
Yeah,
it up?
feel
Because
free to-
basically those are all our questions.
No,
Get to know you,
yeah,
ideas on things, yeah, it was very good. I,
Very, very articulate.
yeah.
Very
yeah, thank you,
articulate.
no, I would just, you know,
So sum it up.
yeah, no, I would just like to say, you know, again, thank you for having me.
No, thank you.
I think, you know, again, as somebody who's come up through the district as a teacher, an administrator, and now a parent,
Yeah.
you know, I have a lot of different perspectives
Yeah, you do.
that I can
Yeah,
bring.
good points, yeah.
You know, to really represent the various share, excuse me, stakeholders
Yeah.
in the district.
Who you pointed out were the kids. That was very important.
Yeah.
You said you're there for the kids, because
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
that's what the
Yeah.
school committee members are. It's
Yeah.
not for me or from, you know,
No.
parents, it's really for the kids.
Yeah,
And you have a bird's
Kids,
eye
the
view, I
best
think, being
education.
in the system. Yeah.
Kids,
Yes.
especially in today's culture.
for sure.
Today's
Yeah.
culture is,
Yeah.
well, it's so different from when we grew up. We
Yeah.
went to North Middlesex.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very different.
It is.
Mm.
Very good.
Oh.
Yep. Thank you. We
Thank
wish
you.
you luck.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
good
very
luck.
And I'm
much.
glad you're there for the kids. Vote for Tom Casey on April 22nd,
Yeah.
school committee. Thank you.